Greetings, happy coders, and welcome to another video. It's been a little while. Obviously, you guys will have seen I've been super busy with getting Snowed Under finished and out there. It's out there. It's been getting a really good response. We've sold well over 100 copies, made more than £500. So hopefully we might reach the target of £1,000 in the end. You never know, over the course of the next month or two. I'd like to think we might get there. So that's been fantastic. If you have bought it, then I appreciate it very much. And if you haven't and you would like to, then of course there's a link in the video description below if you want to check it out. All benefits, all profits go to the charity Crisis that help homeless people and provide them with a bit of Christmas cheer at this time of year. So thanks a lot for all of your support. Okay, so this video, in a way, I suppose, is mainly for people who are interested in AGDx, and especially in AGDx Plus, which is a kind of enhanced version of AGDx, where you can choose additional features that you can add to the engine. And this has been quite a good challenge, really, because obviously, if you really want to put an engine through its paces, there's no better way than getting it to run in a game. And Snowed Under features quite a lot of additional patches and changes to the sort of vanilla version of AGD or AGDx that you might be used to. So I thought I'd make a video today and just go through most of those changes and talk about some of the things that I added. Some of these are very specific to the game itself, and some of them are options which would be part of AGDx Plus. So the first thing we'll talk about, I've mentioned it before, is that AGDx Plus has AY tunes built in. So rather than using David Safire's excellent musicizer, it uses the same code, it's David's code, but it's integrated so that you can import the songs. As you can see, we've got the songs here with the credits. A couple of these songs we've taken from ZX Art, where they have lots of songs that you can choose, and they're free to use as long as you give credit, so that's what we've done. And you can basically listen to them. Oops, there you go. So this is the main theme on the intro. And that can be edited in the script so that you can effectively have music which doesn't just play over the game but changes according to the scenario. So we have intro music, we have game start music, we have music when you finish the level, music when you die, all those kind of different things. So it's what gives it a lot of variety and atmosphere, and of course in a Christmas game that's something you really want to make sure that you have. So that was a nice option. The other thing that the next thing I suppose we could show you is that the menu at the start is different to the classic AGD menu. So the normal menu you get is just a static screen with a choice, 1, 2 or 3, to choose Kempston or keyboard or Kempston or interface 2, I think it is. So if we look at this one here, we'll see. So I didn't really want to talk over the music there, so I think what I'll do is I'll just turn the volume right down on the music so I can then talk over it. Okay, that's a lot quieter, so hopefully you can hear me clearly now. Yeah, so as you can see, what we've got here is a dynamic introduction screen menu. It has a scrolling bar going across. It uses the original code for this, is built in within AGD as an option. I doubled the width of the text to give it that larger and also slightly snowy effect. You can also see the particle effect here, which is a modification of the original trail engine, trail particle effect, and what it does is it just randomizes the direction a little bit, and instead of moving in 4 directions, it randomly moves in 3 directions: left, right, or down, and then it always also moves 1 pixel down. So what that means is you get pixels which fall at slightly random speeds. Some of them fall slightly faster and then fall slower, and they also move left and right. So that's how it kind of looks like snow to some extent anyway, with a bit of imagination. This also makes use of panel code. I'll talk about the panels a little bit later, and of course you have an option to press fire or press the keyboard, and rather than choose Kempston or keyboard, then it auto detects the Kempston, and it will detect that, and you can just pick up and play with the Kempston, just use it without having to select it. And if you want to use any other joystick, then obviously they are keyboard joysticks and you can redefine them. So that means that there's no real need to have a choice each time. You just redefine it if you want to and then keep it that way, and then from then on you can just press fire every time. So I think that's a little more convenient. The other big difference, of course, is that it's a dynamic menu screen. So if we exit this one, and if you look in here in the intro menu, this is where you can code your menu. And what I've got here, there's a few things here that's machine language, which basically is initializing particle engine and a few things like this. But the main part is we set up the menu and we say where we want our redefined keys to appear. And I also use a variable here to allow me to have a loop. So it runs a loop like a normal event loop. And there are certain things that happen only once. The first time, which is drawing the screen, it's drawing the logo. And then there are certain things which loop, and the things which loop, obviously, as you can see here, are the trail, and there's a custom command here called creds, which is showing the credits. So those are the 2 things which effectively loop each time. So it draws the menu, the snowed under logo, and the menu option, and it keeps that on screen. Then it loops the trail and the scroller. So you can choose a few different things if you want. Whatever you want in the menu, you can have it so that it's dynamic. You may notice actually that there is one other small thing that happens. It's fairly subtle, but perhaps you might have noticed that the little character also blinks now and again when you see. So that's just, these little tiny details make me smile, so I hope they do the same for you too. So we have a few different ways of displaying larger graphics within here. We use some of the traditional AGD methods. For example, there is a font here, and we do display the temperature gauge here using that. And you can see a little bit of holly there and so on. Some of it is done using blocks, which is a more common way. You can see the ready sign here using blocks. But the main way that we display the larger elements of the game we use these panels here like this. So this is a completely new addition, and it allows you to use about 4K, 5K of contended memory. So it's additional memory that's not being used by AGD. It's completely free to be used, and you can load up your own graphics in there. The very first time that I did something like this was with Roust. If you've played Roust, you'll know it has a very big sort of joust style logo at the start of the game, and that was done by with help from David Sapphire again, and that was stored in contended memory, and that was kind of what gave me the idea. But in this case, what we have are actually panels, and you can define the size of the panel here. And as you can see, these are 6 by 5. So to make one piece of logo like this, I use 3 panels for that one and for the message. And then that's convenient because it allows me to do something to have a smaller logo like in Aid of Crisis like this. I can show them a little more clearly. Here you see. So that allows me to put panels on the screen and give, I suppose, what you'd call a nicer, more professional, more polished feel. So yeah, these were done by Craig Howard, by the way, who also did the loading screen. So shout out to him for that. And yeah, they're a nice way, as I said, to add stuff into games, especially in intro screens and things like that. They're not going to be fast moving like sprites, but they do allow you to put quite a lot of polish. So yeah, that's the panel system. Just another thing that was added. Okay, so let's continue with that and take a look at the next part. Okay, so this is a custom code. The Advent calendar is completely custom code, and it kind of works within the its assembly, that is to say. It's not AGD script. So that runs when the game first loads a level, and it checks what level you're on, and it runs code for displaying all of the different entries in the Advent calendar, which actually use AGD objects, but that in itself uses another feature of AGDx Plus, which is colored objects. So let's take a look at the colored objects and how they work. So as you'll know, normally in AGD, objects only have, well, they don't have any colors unless you use a trick. So what I've done is I've created a little space in memory that can store 4 colors for each object, and they are used on the Advent calendar, and they can show you all the different sort of entries in the Advent calendar there. So I won't go too far and spoil them for you too much. But yeah, in terms of the design, you can change the color. You can change the color of the paper or the ink of the whole thing by pressing the normal key I, and then you can also choose whichever segment you're in and press Control I, and then you can change the individual colors like that. Alright, now another thing that is also kind of a hack is you may have noticed that in the game you've got a gift which appears, and that gift you then collect, and it's placed on the screen at a particular point, and the actual objects don't appear unless they're in the Advent calendar. So that's another kind of hack, and I'll explain a little bit again about that, about how that works. Obviously you need to have some knowledge of AGD, I suppose, to follow this, but I guess those of you that do will find it interesting. So what I actually do, as you can see, if you look at the room numbers here, they're all set to 254, which means that they're not active. But what we do to make them appear is we set the room to the room that we want them to be in, and then we, whoops, sorry, I pressed P to place it, but obviously P is now for paper. We press R, and there you can see in room number 1 I'm placing it here. So I place it here in room number 1. See, I can move that around. It appears as a gift because it's set to, if it appears on the screen, it won't display, it'll default to the gift image rather than the original image. So if I place it there like that, then what I do is I set the room to 254, but it retains the original coordinates. So now it's in that position in room 254. So that allows me to store an object which can then spawn in the place that I've defined it. So effectively what that means is the object is in the right place, it's just not spawned. And then all I need to do to spawn it is reset the object to have its room here, right? And there isn't a command within AGD to do that. If in the future I may well add one, to make an object appear or something, to make it appear in the room without needing to set its coordinates. Right now, AGD command is, I think, put, and it puts it at the place of the sprite coordinate. So what we would want is something like object appear or something, so that it would manifest itself in the current room with its coordinates already set. So that would allow you to make objects appear in any position that you would want them to when they're activated. And I think that would be really useful, because you could have objects, of course, like a sword or something like this, that you want to magically appear when the user has collected something or done a spell, or all those kind of silly little things that we put into games. Or you could use it perhaps to cause a door to be locked, or various other things like that. An object could be made to do that. So that's another thing that could be possible in the future. But the main thing is just the nice colors. And again, it's Christmas. It works really well. It's a really good way of demonstrating that. And if I go back to the very last object here, without showing too many, in case you want to avoid spoilers, you can see the last object, object 24, which is the 25th object. That one is the gift. So we've got 25 screens. So we've got those 25 objects, and then of course the very last one is not going to appear, because that's the very end of the game, and so you get a separate window for that. You don't need an object for that. So that's the thinking behind that, and those are the objects, and those are some of the possibilities. Right, okay. Couple of other things. What else can I talk to you about? All right, well, actually, one of the things I can talk to you about here is, you see this thing here, it's called C memory, right? Which I put here basically means like contended memory. And the reason for that is that there are certain events, some of you may be aware of this, but there are certain events, if you look in the event list here, certain events, things like intro, initialize game, restart screen, a few things like this, they're not in-game events, and those are not actually stored in non-contended memory. They're actually stored below the game, and there is a limit to how much that you can put in there. So I think when Jonathan first designed it, he set it up to be about 1.3, 1.4K, maybe 1.5, I'm not sure. But at any rate, I don't think he imagined that people would kind of go over that limit, but obviously people have started to get more and more creative over time, started adding more things into their intro screens, and there isn't really a way around that to get more memory for that. So what the only real thing that you can do, which is what I've done here, is it's just informing me how much memory I'm actually using for my intro screens. And if I reach that kind of limit, I'm getting very close to it there, then I could potentially be in trouble. It will cause the game to crash. Okay, so moving on, a few other things that are added here. We also have BeepFX here, which is a beeper engine by a guy called Shiru, Alex, who is a very well-known coder, and this integrates an adapted version of his beeper effects into the game. So the beep effects are great, but what they tended to do was stop the processor as they play them. So I made a modification so that the beeper would be played, as tiny bits of the beep would be played during the interrupt, and that would allow a kind of beep effect that wouldn't interfere with the gameplay as much, right? It still does cause a little tiny bit of slowdown, but it's spread over a longer time. And yeah, I think, but because basically the AGD beeper noises, they've kind of worn out their welcome, let's be honest. I mean, every single AGD game has more or less the same sound effects, and so I really didn't want this one to have those very obvious AGD sounds. It's a very simplistic editor, and you just have to load the data in and it will process it. And I might look at that, show a video on that in the future, but basically what you do is you create the beep effects in Shiru's beep effects editor, and then you load them in, and then you can call them as normal sounds, and again, if we look in the game itself, I'll turn the music off. So obviously any sound on the old Spectrum is never going to win any big prizes, is it? But I think you'll agree it does sound a little different to the normal sounds that you get within AGD, and again, it gives it that feeling. So yeah, and since we're here, we might as well talk about a few other things. Obviously, we've got the trail effect working here with the snow, and one of the inspirations of the game, of course, is that it does take some elements from Manic Miner, where you have to collect things and then pick up the last object, and there is melting platforms and so on. But I think it's different enough that it's not really like Manic Miner. It's a lot faster for a start, and the effects are quite different. But yeah, the particle engine here, what it does is we've got actually 8 different blocks that can be used for the platforms as they melt. And if I just slow things down here, okay, so I'm running the game at 20% its normal speed, and we can take a look at how when he lands on the platform here, let's see. There, and I'll just pause it. So what you would see there is step by step the platforms are being replaced, and each time that the platforms are replaced, I just generate 1 or 2 extra pixels of trail, and that adds up to a nice little effect where, as you can see, those little bits of snow all start to fall down and reach the bottom of the screen, and that gives it a very satisfying sort of snow effect. And then, as well as that, I'll just put the timer back up to normal speed. So I put it on double speed now so that you can see the idea here is that the snow is falling and it will slowly refill the platforms. So as you can see, that's what happens here, and they slowly sort of build back up. But I wanted that to happen relatively slowly because it kind of encourages you then to be careful where you step and try to leave yourself, when you're planning a route, try to give yourself a way back quickly so that you have enough time. So if you just wander around and let yourself just use up all the snow, it's very pretty, but you're going to find yourself getting stuck quite quickly. So yeah, that's just another feature of the game. Now, another thing which I think I may have to reset the game to do this, but in fact I'll probably do that now. So let me reset it and I'll show you. Okay, so before I pause it, I'll just tell you what it is. So I wanted to give the game a bit more of a feeling of an arcade or a console, so I put a little bit of inertia into the controls, so that rather than just turning on a sixpence, so to speak, you kind of move and then it slows down and turns. And the same thing also when he's in air. It gives it a little bit more of a feeling of a sort of Nintendo, like a kind of Mario or something like that. So I'll show you what I mean here. So if I'm moving along and if I turn, you should be able to see that he actually, if I just moves a little bit after you stop. And there's just a little period, if you can notice that if you look closely. I'll slow it down actually, that'll make it even easier to see. Okay, so as you can see, as I turn, there you see he's got a little bit of movement where he keeps going forward even when you turn around like that, you see, especially there. So it gives it just a little bit of a feeling of walking on snow, but more than anything else, it just makes it just that little bit more analog, you know, and that gives you quite a pleasant, I think anyway, quite sort of soft feeling, so that it doesn't feel quite so digital or, well, you know, 1982 sort of feeling where when games were designed in that way without those additional feelings. So yeah, what I would say is that when you're coding games, you should always be very much aware of what experience it is that you're going to be giving to the player, and sometimes that's a conscious thing and sometimes it's a subconscious thing. So little things like that, where you give the player a little bit of wiggle room, if you like, a little bit of analog feeling, it just gives it a slightly more human feel to it. It just adds something that I think is kind of intangible. And sometimes, you know, when you add these things, when you put little details and various things like this, players won't notice them straight away, and then they might notice them a little bit later as they get to know the game. But they do give that sort of, I suppose you would call it a little bit of emotional content almost. And I think that's really important, even in old machines like this, to try to add that. And that's why attention to detail is so important when it comes to coding. And another example of that is also the discussion, quite lengthy discussions that Andy and I had about the difficulty level of the game and how it should work. And I initially wanted this life bar, this temperature bar, to not reset at all, so that if you finish the game you would get a little bit of bonus maybe, but then you would have to continue and try to just keep your temperature up. And we were going to add various ways of doing that, including little bonus items like hot chocolate and things like that that would be included that would help you to restore the life bar. But as it turned out, in the end, we thought, with it being a Christmas game, we wanted it to be more of a family game. So we didn't want it to be too difficult, we just wanted it to be fun. And again, that's the thing you should always think about. Who's going to play it? What are they going to do? So in this example, we're thinking, well, people are just going to play this over Christmas and probably for a week or two and have fun with it. So they really should be able to complete it within that time. And perhaps they want to play it with their kids and so on. So those are the kind of things that you think about. I mean, of course, you always are going to make a game for yourself first and foremost that you would enjoy. But those are the kind of things still that you should think about in terms of who's going to play it and how. And as it turned out, this worked out really well. A sort of happy accident, but it did work out well, because not only the game is quite easy and fun, but the fact that you start with a timer here, and it means that every level has a potential score limit to it. So if you work out the exact path, the right path that you can take, with the maximum avoidance of enemies, and if you use the snowball you can freeze the enemies, and then that will mean that your temperature doesn't go down as much, then there is a theoretical, more or less, maximum score that you can get on a level. So you can finish almost all the levels fairly easily. I would say anyone with a little bit of gaming experience could spend an hour or two and finish the game, and that's what we wanted. But if you want to really go for it and try and get the maximum possible scores, and if you want to take part in a high score challenge, then you need to figure out the exact perfect routes that you can take in order to get the maximum score. And all of the levels are pretty much designed to have the ability to kind of move in various different routes. You can plan your route and which order you're going to get the stars in quite extensively, so that it did actually work out pretty well in the end. Some of the gameplay elements that we originally planned, especially the icicles, which are there to allow you to actually destroy the enemies. You can hit an icicle, it will fall and it will destroy an enemy. It's not really implemented that much in the game, neither is the snowball to too much extent, but they are things that you can kind of discover and explore. And again, in the end it worked out because it's kind of like a gift that you can give to the player, and if they want to play it that way, then it's just that kind of added sandbox, have a bit of fun with it sort of a feel. And that's very much what we set out to do, and hopefully managed to achieve on some level. I'll just skip forward to a little bit further in the game here, just to show you one more little feature. This comes from AGDx Plus as well. So normally in AGD you have commands which allow the sprite to move left or right, up and down, and so you get a lot of these patrolling enemies, and there are plenty of those in this game, but we wanted to do a little bit of variety, and so there is another patch which allows you to give sprites anything up to 16 different directions, so a kind of clockwise option, a bit like a turtle, where you can say 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, so 0 is up, 4 is right, and so on. And with a bit of timing, that was how we were able to create enemies that move like this. So if we just go to the game here, you can see that you've got the angel and the imp kind of flying around in circles, making it again a totally different challenge. Well, not totally, but you know what I mean. Yes, that's another addition that we did. A few other things. It does have a patch to include collectible blocks as well, so these are all collectible. What happens here is that on each level, when the level starts, it quickly scans the room and finds out how many objects there are to collect and where they are, and that's how it manages to kind of do the update with the flashing colors as well. And that was again a design choice, because we were sending the game out to lots of different people in the community, and big thanks and shout out to all of the guys who did contribute levels. That would enable them to just place their objects where they wanted, and I wouldn't have to do any extra coding to kind of check how many objects in this room, that room, or whatever. We just got the engine to count them, and so that worked out pretty nicely as well. So that's another effect, and obviously there's also a nice little ice effect here, which is your sort of classic video game ice, where you slide along. But I added the addition that you can escape the ice by jumping. So it feels as though you're in constant movement, but as you would be able to on ice, I suppose you would be able to jump. You might not be able to turn around, but anyway, I thought it made it quite a fun way of dealing with that. So that was another addition. So yeah, I mean, that's about it. I guess I've probably rambled on for long enough now. I hope that some of you who are interested in this kind of thing have enjoyed my kind of insight into this. The other thing, of course, that we did is when you save the game, it also has to save off the extra data, the panel data, the music, and so on. So it's one thing to add these features, it's another to make them kind of fully functional within the engine so that you can create a standalone game. So there is that. And if you are interested in getting involved with AGDx Plus and development, then eventually it will be made available for anyone to use for free. For the time being, I'm just limiting it to some of the people on Patreon who support me, so that they can try a few things out and give me feedback and help me to develop it to the point where it's bug free, more or less, and we can make it available. But if you want to be involved in that, then I would very much appreciate the support. What you'll be doing, of course, is aside from helping me, you'll be building on the great work that Jonathan started, and encouraging more people to get into coding on this lovely little machine. And so yeah, we can't always just keep going back and playing Manic Miner and Jetpack and so on. So I like to think that with your help and with the help of lots of others, we'll be able to push forward and keep trying new things. Okay, so that's it for today. You can find the link to the Patreon below. And as always, happy coding. Bye-bye.